another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Karen, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the February 22nd, 2026 issue of the New York Times Business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, our first article is Tech Leaders Are All In on AI, the Public Not So Much. Silicon Valley executives promise that artificial intelligence is going to radically change everyone's life for the better, starting just a few minutes from now. AI is described as the new electricity. It's even bigger than fire. Don't bother saving money for retirement because everyone will be rich, rich, rich. Your grandparents heard pretty much the same thing. The creators of a new technology have always sold it as producing a fundamental transformation of human existence. The radio was touted as bringing perpetual peace on Earth. Television was supposed to arouse so much empathy for different cultures that it would end war. Cable television would educate the masses and lead to widespread enlightenment. This time, though, the masses have not been won over. In a U.gov survey last year, more than a third of respondents said they were concerned that AI would end human life on Earth. Even those with a more hopeful attitude overwhelmingly said in another poll that they would not pay extra to put AI on their devices. And in the most recent large survey conducted by the National Bureau of Economic Research, 80% of firms reported that AI was having no impact on their productivity or employment. The chief salesman of the AI boom, Sam Altman of OpenAI, said there was more resistance to the diffusion, the absorption of AI into the culture and economy than he expected. Looking at what's possible, it does feel sort of surprisingly slow, Mr. Altman said at an AI conference this month. Jensen Huang, chief executive of the chip maker NVIDIA, is worried. The tech industry hype may seem omnipresent, but Mr. Huang feels the battle of narratives is being won by the critics. It's extremely hurtful, frankly, Mr. Huang said in a podcast interview last month. A lot of damage has been done by very well-respected people who have painted a doomer narrative, end-of-the-world narrative, science fiction narrative. In Mr. Huang's view, the critics want regulations that will hamper the AI industry and slow it down. Meanwhile, the skeptics are scaring people from making the investments in AI that would make it better. NVIDIA, which makes the chips that power AI data centers, does not lack investors. It is now the most highly valued company in the world, with a market capitalization of $4.5 trillion. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta have also seen their values soar. Some AI startups have become fantastically valuable practically overnight in a way never quite seen before, starting with OpenAI. Mr. Huang is nevertheless correct. Adoption has plateaued. In the fourth quarter of 2025, 38% of employees told Gallup that their workplace had integrated AI technology. That number was essentially unchanged from the third quarter. AI is clearly not technology that is being universally encouraged as inevitable. Corporations often report that, so far, it does not seem to do much, but fears are everywhere. The S&P North American Software Index fell 15% in January, its biggest monthly decline in 17 years, on fears that AI would replace software. I can't really remember a boom with such active hostility to it, said William Quinn, co-author of Boom and Bust, A Global History of Financial Bubbles. People usually find new technology exciting. It happened with electricity, bicycles, motor cars. There were fears, but also hopes. AI is notable, perhaps unique, for lack of enthusiasm. Even as more than half of Americans have tried large language models, and virtually everyone who has done anything online has inadvertently used AI, studies show that people are far more worried than they are excited. According to Pew, 61% of respondents to a 2025 survey said they wish they had more control over how AI was used in their own life. The New York Times has sued OpenAI and Microsoft, claiming copyright infringement of news content related to AI systems. The two companies have denied the suit's claims. The New York Times, the indifference and hostility to AI were probably inevitable. AI's champions describe an unsettling future where humans who use the technology will replace those who don't. Perhaps this is why AI regulation is one of the few issues that a divided America seems united on. 80% of Americans want rules for AI, even if that means the technology develops more slowly, according to a Gallup survey last spring. It's not just low-skilled workers who are wary. Each year, Edelman, the global communications firm, surveys trust in society. In its latest report, released in January, 2/3 of low-income U.S. respondents said that people like me will be left behind rather than realize any real advantages from generative AI. Perhaps more remarkably, nearly half the high-income workers felt the same way. A boom and booms. Era-defining booms used to be few and far between. The South Seas Mantia of 1720, the British Railway boom in the 1840s, the Roaring Twenties, Tokyo in the 1980s. These booms followed a familiar pattern. A few investors assert that new developments, usually involving technology, change things. Early believers make money. That draws in more investors. Critics are drowned out. Speculators take over. The boom becomes a bubble and pops. Everyone has regrets and swears to be more sober in the future. Eventually, a new technology comes along. Utopia beckons and the process begins again. One generation after another has renewed the belief that whatever was said about earlier technologies, the latest one will fulfill a radical and revolutionary promise. Vincent Mosco, a technology historian, wrote in The Digital Sublime, Myth, Power, and Cyberspace. Bubbles are coming thick and fast these days. There was a boom in booms. There was a Japanese stock bubble, then the Thai and Taiwanese bubbles, then .com housing, the Chinese stock market, crypto, and now AI, said Mr. Quinn, a senior lecturer in finance at Queen's University Belfast. You have a very mobile financing, a deregulated financial system, and rapid technological change, all of which make it easy for ordinary people to speculate. A few months ago, worried about a stock market that seemed to have little basis for its continued ascent, analysts and investors began wondering how the AI boom would end. The boom of the Roaring Twenties ended in the Great Depression, after all. The debate produced little consensus. Andrew Odzliko, a scholar of investment manias, thinks the discussion stalled because it relied too much on an outdated notion of booms and bubbles. Look at cryptocurrency, he said. It has been around for 15 years. Few pretend any more than that crypto has any value beyond speculation. But while its price has weakened lately, it has risen over the long term. The high price is a reflection of just one thing: the faith of its investors, which, at least so far, has overwhelmed doubts. As our society is getting more complicated and wealthier, it is losing contact with reality, said Dr. Ezeko, a former head of the University of Minnesota's Digital Technology Center. Mass psychology is now far more important than technology or economics. Doom and Doomer. For all the familiarity of its promises to change the world, some things about the AI boom are different and are holding it back from the warm embrace of the public. Past booms like the 1849 California gold rush or the dot-com bubble offered at least the illusion of public participation. You too could go to California and try your luck. Starting an AI company, on the other hand, requires expertise and serious funding. For most people, AI is instead something imposed on them, starting with their email and web browser. Another problem is that the biggest boosters of AI have a tendency to come out with very dark comments, sometimes without seeming to realize it. The talk show host Jimmy Fallon last winter somewhat plaintively asked Bill Gates, the Microsoft co-founder, "Will we still need humans?" Mr. Gates replied, "Not for most things." This month, Mrinak Sharma, the leader of the Safeguards research team at Anthropic, cryptically posted on social media that he felt pressured to set aside what matters most. The world, he said, is in peril, and while the problems were not just from AI, he was quitting to write poetry. The doomer narratives, as Mr. Huang of NVIDIA would call them, are coming from inside the AI house. The tech executives who are betting their company's futures on the triumph of AI have many resources to make sure it happens. They can spend even more money to build even more data centers, and on the other hand, data centers around the country are increasingly a target of opposition for local residents who dislike the noise, the disruption, the secrecy, and the lack of community benefits like jobs. Satya Nadella, the chief executive of Microsoft, recognizes the risks here. He believes that the real question is when AI will be perceived as helping people. People admire AI as a newfangled tech tool that can perhaps do amazing things, he suggested at the Davos Economic Forum last month. But they don't necessarily see a positive effect in their own lives. I think we, even as a global community, have to get to a point where we're using this to do something useful that changes the outcomes of people and communities and countries, Mr. Nadella said. Without that, he warned, the technology will lose social permission to, for example, use as much energy as it does, a thirst pushing up the price of electricity for U.S. households. The AI companies seem increasingly alert to a perception problem. This year's Super Bowl featured AI-themed ads that were defensive or just odd. Amazon's ad showed AI proposing ways to kill Chris Hemsworth. The twist at the end, AI disarms him with a promised massage. Enthralled to devices. Anxiety over technology has been building for a long time. What is new with AI is that the fears are so vague yet so comprehensive that they are breaching the walls of Silicon Valley itself. In a 2024 survey of registered voters in the Bay Area, three-quarters said the leading tech companies had too much power and influence. Robert Thomas, a retired Bay Area psychologist, is one of the disaffected. At first, we greatly appreciated the electronic conveniences created by cyber geniuses, the personal computer, the internet, the iPad, etc., he said. However, since then, things feel out of control. More and more, my life is partly controlled by some electronic device. Even worse, I barely relate to people anymore. From the point of view of the AI promoters, an inability to relate to human beings is not a defect but a virtue. I suspect that in a couple of years, on almost any topic, the most interesting, maybe the most emphatic conversation that you could have will be with an AI, Mr. Altman, the OpenAI chief executive, said on a podcast. No wonder Mr. Thomas, who is 78, often feels frustrated. He fantasizes about punching a young tech worker in the face, and yet he had ChatGPT write a speech for his wife's birthday. It was beautiful and eloquent, all of which means the future of AI could probably go either way. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, our next article is titled, "It's a Grocery Store, but Selling Food Isn't the Point." Happier Grocery in New York is an entry point for people seeking a community built on inside knowledge. It's not alone. A reading room, a rooftop garden with Italian honeybees, art exhibitions featuring the work of local artists, and a guest in residence bedroom. What may sound like a luxurious retreat is actually a grocery store on a busy stretch of Canal Street in Soho, one of New York's most fashionable neighborhoods. Happier Grocery opened in 2023 and debuted its event space called The Apartment the next year. It has hosted chess nights, family-style dinner parties with chefs, yoga and breathwork classes, and knitting workshops led by Ella Elmhoff, daughter of the former second gentleman of the United States, among other experiences. There is, of course, a podcast. It's an actual grocery store, too, selling things like strawberries, glass jugs of pink-hued almond milk, powdered organ supplements, and branded merchandise displayed in refrigerators, all at prices New Yorkers wouldn't wildly protest. Just for comparison, a mango smoothie at Happier Grocery is under $14, while one at Ruhan, another premium grocer, sells for $20. But at Happier Grocery, the food sales are perhaps beside the point. When the New York Times asked Wells Stellberger, who owns Happier Grocery with his brother, Dawson Stellberger, whether the store was profitable, he demurred, saying, "We're driven by things that really interest us more than this is great for the bottom line or this would be such a profitable project." Think of it as an entry point for people who want to be part of a community built on exclusive inside knowledge. It's this chasm that we've crossed where grocery stores themselves have become a way of signaling taste, said Andrea Hernandez, who writes a Substack newsletter called Snack Shot on grocery store trends. You could get groceries from anywhere, but the fact that you're choosing to go to Happier Grocery allows them to be like, what is the Happier Grocery lifestyle? Nobody asked what kind of art gallery curation a grocery store would look like, but now we know. The idea then is that once enough people are collected, the business opportunities are endless. Those people could potentially become part of Happier Grocery's universe, an umbrella that includes an office space, event spaces, a members only club, and a hotel in development. Fred Hart, a design and branding consultant for the consumer brands that include Kafia, Recess, and Momofuku, some of which are stocked at Happier Grocery, said he believed the Stahlburgers were focused on building the community first, then looking at what business opportunities are there to cater to all these people that care so passionately about me. The art gallery, the chef tastings, and all the other experiences the store offers are all catering to the same audience. That cultural phenomenon, albeit a small one so far, is starting to get more popular with high-end grocery stores. Meadow Lane, a gourmet grocery in Tribeca, had already built a large following on TikTok months before it opened in November. Sammy Nussdorf, the store's owner, whose family was once listed on Forbes as one of America's richest, said he is scoping out real estate for future locations. And in London, the cafe and grocery store Corner Shop also hosts workshops and events like pop-up dinner parties. You have to buy food, Mr. Stahlberger said. How do you reimagine what that experience looks like and then not allow other kinds of activities or programs to come alongside that as well to make it even more of a rich experience? New York is full of high-end grocery stores, including Zabar's and Italy, and brands having event spaces and studios connected to their stores isn't new. The clothing like Alo Yoga has in-store yoga studios, for example, a way to bring in additional revenue and build more trust and it hopes spending. But those businesses still depend on their goods to turn a profit. In Happier Grocery's case, the idea is more about taking a run-of-the-mill business and turning it into a lifestyle brand. All you need is the right setting and more than enough funding. WeWork, which tried to do so with office rentals, is a cautionary tale of what can happen when the cash runs out. What Happier is doing is something that grocery stores haven't really done, according to Mr. Hart. He said typical grocery stores are all about getting people in and out of the stores, buying the product. But at Happier, these guys are like, no, we'll focus on building a group and then we'll figure out all the different things we can sell. Neither the Stahlbergers, Mr. Nussdorf, nor the people behind Corner Shop had any experience in the grocery store business before their current ventures. Dawson Stahlberger spent the past two decades in real estate and is the founder of Bushwick Capital, a real estate development firm that owns commercial properties in Bushwick, Brooklyn. He is behind a 154-room geothermal-powered hotel in development and is an owner of the building that houses the popular music venue Elsewhere. Welsterberger was formerly a designer at Marc Jacobs, according to his LinkedIn profile. He owned a popular restaurant in Bushwick called Outer Space, which abruptly closed in 2021 after reports of an exploitative work environment. The brothers are also partners in WSA, an office tower in the financial district known for splashy parties attended by artists, celebrities, and influencers. Emily Ratajkowski, Kendall Jenner, Lana Del Rey, and Bad Bunny have all been to parties at WSA. The people behind WSA include the owners of Palm Heights, a luxury hotel on Grand Cayman Island, Matthew Khalil, a British real estate developer, and his wife, Gabriella Khalil. Mr. Khalil is also a partner with Dawson Stelberger in a number of real estate firms, one of which bought WSA. Both Happier Grocery and WSA are part of Happier People Management, the hospitality management and staffing group founded in 2020 that also operates the members-only club Scott Avenue Associates, the event Space 99 Scott, and Bright Eye Production, a catering kitchen. In London, the corner shop is on the first floor of a luxury residential building called 180 The Thames. The fashion designer Alex Eagle serves as creative director of the development, and her husband, Mark Wadwa, is the founder and real estate developer behind the projects. Making your life easy is luxury, and access is luxury, Miss Eagle said. When asked about profitability, she said that she was not able to comment on specific figures, but that Corner Shop was more successful than we could imagine. Access to a vertical integration of culture, she said, is what makes residents and office workers want to stick around. You can buy your clothes, a beautiful edit of beauty, your food, supplements, sports, and culture, and then boom, you really don't need to leave the building, she said. People shopping at Happier Grocery feel the same. Nikki Eigel, an image researcher and archivist for the fashion and beauty industries, said she could spend hours at Happier. I like looking at the different milks and all the different cheeses, she said. I just like constantly discovering things. If it's all in the same place, I'm going to spend an hour and a half there, and I'll probably end up buying more. Miss Eigel and her co-founder, Stephen Chalkin, run an archive and research library called Library 180 in a corner suite at the WSA building. They also curated a newsstand space for Happier Grocery in December, filled with rare and vintage holiday-themed books and magazines. The experience of a grocery store historically is a very in-and-out experience, Mr. Chalkin said. I think that what they're building is something that's very community-based and about exploration and discovery and culture. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, our next article is What's New This Filing Season? You've heard about additional breaks in last year's legislation, but they might look different in practice. Millions of Americans will collect bigger tax refunds this filing season thanks to an assortment of new tax breaks legislators introduced in a landmark tax and spending bill last summer. Affluent households are more likely to benefit the most. Taxpayers will inevitably have questions, and the Internal Revenue Service has far fewer staff members to answer them this year. The agency is more than 25% leaner than it was last tax season, which could strain customer service. There's a lot to consider. The new law made permanent some of the expiring tax breaks that legislators passed during President Trump's first term, including a larger standard deduction. It also introduced several that you probably heard about. No taxes on tips and overtime. Sounds simple, but it's more complex and less generous in practice. The bill stands to reduce individual 2025 taxes by $129 billion, according to estimates from the Tax Foundation. The average taxpayer should receive a tax cut of $611, according to those estimates. The typical refund may be as much as $1,000 more than usual. Here's a rundown of the largest changes to consider as the filing deadline, April 15th, approaches. And one programming note, when we refer to a tax year, this is what we mean. If we're describing tax year 2025, that's the year of financial activity you are summing up on the tax forms you file the following year. Should I consider any strategic changes to filing this year? Possibly. The standard deduction has risen slightly for tax year 2025 to $15,750 for singles, $31,500 for married joint filers, and $23,625 for heads of household. Taking the standard deduction will make sense for many taxpayers since they won't have enough individual deductions to make it worth itemizing them. That said, more filers may want to contemplate itemizing because of other changes, namely a more generous deduction on state and local taxes. How did the tax treatment of SALT, state and local taxes, change? During Mr. Trump's first term, Congress passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which created a $10,000 cap on the deduction that people could take on their federal tax return for state and local taxes, on earned income and property taxes, for example, if they itemized their deductions. The cap offset the costs of many other tax cuts in the 2017 law, but many residents in high-tax states like New York, California, and New Jersey took a big hit. For tax year 2025, the cap is rising to $40,000. The full deduction then decreases incrementally for single people and married joint filers with modified adjusted gross income of more than $500,000, and the $10,000 ceiling returns for those with income of $600,000 or more. While a better standard deduction makes it less likely that many filers will want or need to itemize their deductions, the larger SALT deduction may make using it worthwhile again for people in states with higher income and property taxes, at least to the tax year 2029, after which it reverts back to $10,000. Have the rules around deducting mortgage costs finally stopped changing? The maximum mortgage interest you can deduct is not rising from its current $750,000 level for more recent mortgages. Without the 2025 tax bill, the cap would have gone up. What's changing with the tax breaks for charitable deductions? Two main things are happening here, and they take effect in the 2026 tax year. First, if you take the standard deduction, you'll still be able to deduct some charitable contributions. Single people will be able to deduct up to $1,000 in cash contributions, and couples who are married and filing jointly will get $2,000. You can't use this particular deduction, however, if you donate to a donor-advised fund and certain other entities. Second, for more affluent filers who itemize their deductions, starting in the 2026 tax year, people in the 37% tax bracket won't get the full benefit of the deduction for their charitable contribution. Instead, they'll get a deduction as if they were in the 25% bracket. And some more bad news that applies to everyone who itemizes. The only contributions that will be deductible are ones that are above 0.5% of your adjusted gross income. Seniors are getting an extra tax break. How does it work? People who are 65 and older by December 31st of the tax year you're filing for are eligible for a tax deduction of up to $6,000 for individuals and $12,000 for married couples, as long as both spouses qualify. The deduction begins to gradually fade once your modified adjusted gross income passes certain thresholds. $75,000 for single filers or $150,000 for married joint filers. Above those amounts, the deduction begins to decrease, and it goes away once single taxpayer's income reaches $175,000 or $250,000 for couples. The tax break in place for years 2025 through 2028 is available to filers who take the standard deduction as well as those who itemize deductions. I bought a new car. Am I eligible for a break? That largely depends on your income and where your car was assembled. If you bought a new vehicle in 2025 for personal use or plan to before the end of 2028, you may be eligible to deduct up to $10,000 in interest that you pay that tax year on debt that you incurred for the purchase. Vehicles include new cars, minivans, sport utility vehicles, pickup trucks, and motorcycles. But there are limitations. The deduction begins to phase out for single filers with modified adjusted gross incomes of more than $100,000 or more than $200,000 for married couples filing jointly. And the vehicle must undergo final assembly in the United States. You can find the assembly location by checking the vehicle label at the dealership through the vehicle identification number or go through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's website. This is also open to filers who do not itemize their deductions. How has the child tax credit changed? For the 2025 tax year, the child tax credit is now worth up to $2,200 per qualifying child under 17, up from $2,000, but it declines for married joint filers if their modified adjusted gross income exceeds $400,000 or $200,000 for singles and heads of household. It gets complicated, but some people may be able to get some money in the form of refundable credit, up to $1,700. That means if the credit reduces the amount of taxes you owe to zero, any remaining credit would come back to you as a refund. At least one parent's Social Security number, along with the child's, is necessary to qualify. The IRS's interactive tax assistant can help determine eligibility. Are the tax breaks that help defray caregiver costs changing? Yes, but not for the 2025 tax year. They become more generous in 2026. Here's how they work in most cases. If you paid someone to care for a child under the age of 13 or another dependent, like a disabled spouse, older disabled child, or aging parent, so you could work or look for work, you may qualify for the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit. For tax year 2025, you can claim 20 to 35% of qualified expenses, up to a maximum of $3,000 for one qualifying dependent, or $6,000 for two or more. For tax year 2026, you can claim up to 50% of those expenses, and more filers will capture a larger portion of the credit than in 2025, depending on their income. There are too many nuances to list here, but here's a big one. You can't double dip if you're using an employer-provided dependent care flexible spending account. That allowed you to set aside a maximum of $5,000 in pre-tax dollars per household for tax year 2025 and has jumped to $7,500 for tax year 2026. The federal government is offering free money to young children. Is my child eligible? Last year's tax bill created so-called Trump accounts, which are tax-deferred investment accounts for children under 18 that allow parents, guardians, and others to contribute up to $5,000 annually. Many children may be eligible for some free money. Here's what's on offer. The U.S. citizens born between January 1, 2025 and December 31, 2028, the government will provide a one-time contribution of $1,000. The money will land in open accounts automatically, but not until July at the earliest. Some employers and others are providing their own contributions. Older children may also benefit. Michael and Susan Dell have said they will seed the accounts of children born in 2016 through 2024 with $250 as long as they live in zip codes where median incomes are below $150,000. To get any of this free money, you'll have to open an account first, and you can do that via your federal tax return. You'll need to fill out IRS Form 4547, which you can also submit through a government portal after you file your taxes. To learn more about how the accounts work, check out the White House facts at trumpaccounts.gov. H&R Block also explains the mechanics in detail on its website. Will adoptive parents benefit from any changes? Yes, families that paid adoption expenses can take a credit of up to $17,280 per child, and the credit become partly refundable in tax year 2025 via last year's new law. That means filers can get up to $5,000 of the credit back. In other words, it reduces the taxes you owe, and you get anything back that is left over as a refund. A separate tax break lets adopted families exclude up to $17,280 in employer-provided financial assistance from their income. Households can combine the two breaks as long as they're used for different expenses. If you take the exclusion, you have to use that one up first. These tax breaks, however, have limitations for higher income taxpayers. What about overtime? Eligible workers who receive overtime pay may be able to deduct up to $12,500 annually or $25,000 for joint filers on their federal tax return. But the break doesn't eliminate your liability. Payroll taxes and perhaps state and local taxes will still apply. Simply clocking overtime doesn't make you eligible. The deduction applies only to workers covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act, a federal law that requires a minimum wage and overtime pay for work exceeding 40 hours weekly. It's best to check with your employer. Workers who do qualify can deduct only the earnings that exceed the regular pay, the half portion of time and a half, in other words. If an employer pays more than time and a half, however, the law prevents that extra amount from being deductible. Starting next year, it should be easier to determine that amount because employers will have to specify any eligible overtime on your W-2 form. This year will be trickier. While some employers may give you a separate statement showing your overtime, not all will. Some workers may need to analyze their pay stub, and Andy Phillips, vice president at the Tax Institute, part of H&R Block. It's wise to double check with any benefits department or payroll provider. There are also income limitations. The full deduction amount is available to single filers with modified adjusted gross income of up to $150,000. $300,000 for joint filers. Above that, the deduction declines. You will need a Social Security number to be eligible. Married people filing separately are ineligible, and the benefit runs from tax years 2025 through 2028. Is it too late to get tax breaks for an electric vehicle or solar panels for my home? For the 2026 tax year, the federal tax breaks for electric vehicles and a variety of home improvements that help people use less energy or create less environmental damage will be disappearing. Last year, however, many tax breaks were available that you can take advantage of now for the last time, at least until a different Congress brings them back. The rules were complicated, and we published 3 articles about them in 2025 that you can consult online for more detail. If your state has an income tax, all may not be lost. Many states have their own tax incentives, both for vehicles and for a variety of things related to your residence. What about no tax on tips? If you work in a job where tipping is typical, then you may be able to deduct up to $25,000 of your tips from your federal income taxes for the tax years 2025 through 2028. But other taxes, like for Social Security and Medicare, could still apply. There are other nuances. Tips must be voluntary. Servers who receive an automatic 18% for waiting on big tables, for example, couldn't deduct that, but they are permitted to deduct any extra tip they receive above the automatic amount. The tax break, which requires a Social Security number, is reduced for single filers with modified adjusted gross income over $150,000 or $300,000 for joint filers. Filers who are married but filing separately are not eligible. People who work for what the IRS calls a specified service trade or business, which include occupations like accounting, law, and health care, are also ineligible. What's happening with those pass-through deductions for people who own businesses? The big tax bill passed in 2017 created a new deduction for many owners of small businesses. It was supposed to expire at the end of last year, but last year's tax bill extended and slightly expanded it. That means owners of these so-called pass-through businesses will continue to benefit from the tax break, which allows them to deduct up to 20% of their qualifying business income. My student debt was canceled last year. Are there any tax implications? You're in luck. Canceled student debt usually counts as taxable income. There are exceptions, including for debt that goes away via the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. But a temporary tax break made loan discharges from 2021 through 2025 tax years exempt from federal taxation. Some states may apply their own taxes. If you've reached the end of a federal income-driven repayment plan in 2025 and haven't had your loans officially forgiven yet, you will still be eligible for the break as long as you had enough qualifying payments in tax year 2025 that brought you past the forgiveness threshold, experts said. Any other updates or last words of advice? Plenty. We're nerds. You can no longer use the IRS's direct file program to do your taxes for free with the agency itself. Its free file program still exists, however, for eligible people. Filing returns on paper is always a bit dodgy. Will your return get lost, stolen, mired in delays in some remote IRS mail center? And this year, these returns may face even longer delays given the agency's reduced staffing. Wondering where your refund is? Check the IRS website first. Speaking of refunds, bad actors often file fake returns in other people's names and steal the refunds. Fixing the problem can take years. The IRS can issue a PIN to use that can help prevent this from happening. And speaking of problem fixing, the IRS uses voice technology when people call the agency for help. Plenty of callers dislike it. If you are among them, good luck to you if you wish to talk to a human during tax season. If you need to call the IRS, keep in mind that you may reach inexperienced people like employees on loan from Human Resources or the Tech Department, according to the trade publication Government Executive. But if you must call, try the tricks you may have used with Ticketron in the 1980s to purchase front row seats for Journey concerts. Start calling 60 seconds before the opening minute and keep at it until you get through. There's a decent chance the wait will be short, and if you end up with a tax refund, you can use that money to go see a concert. Journey is playing in Spokane on April 15th. Okay, next we have a short article, $36 billion, Japan's first investments in projects in the United States. As part of a trade agreement struck last year, Japan agreed to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in American projects. On Tuesday, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick announced the first of the investments, saying Japan would provide $36 billion, the first phase of its $550 billion pledge to 3 projects, including a natural gas plant in Ohio. During negotiations last summer, the United States threatened to impose aggressive tariffs on Japanese products, but it agreed to a lower tariff of 15% on Japanese exports, providing some relief to Japanese businesses, especially car makers. On Friday, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that President Trump had exceeded his authority in imposing tariffs without congressional approval. The decision left uncertain how countries that have already paid tariffs or move forward with trade agreements would proceed. Japan, like other nations that have pledged to invest in the United States, has sought to frame its investments as strategic. Rosai Akazawa, the trade ministers who led Japan's tariff negotiations with the United States, has called the arrangement a win-win. But another goal seems to be avoiding conflict with Mr. Trump. Japan is already dealing with the fallout of trade tensions with China, its largest trading partner. Would they be doing this normally? Probably not, David Bowling, a principal at the Asia Group, a strategic advisory firm, told River Akira Davis and Anna Swanson of the New York Times. But, he added, there are other more compelling reasons to be doing this. We have some quotes from different people. There is a new influencer you need to reach, and it's this AI model. That's said by Brian Stempick, a co-founder of Evertune, an artificial intelligence startup that helps companies analyzing what chatbots are saying about them. And another quote, Donald Trump's administration wants to silence anyone who says anything bad about Trump on TV because all Trump does is watch TV. And that was said by Stephen Colbert, who said this on his CBS late night show, that he was barred from airing an interview with a Democratic candidate for a U.S. Senate race in Texas. In the next quote, I'm actually well known to be sort of bad at this. And that was said by Mark Zuckerberg, who took the stand in a trial about social media addiction on his past testimonies and media appearances. And that's it for today. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 22nd, 2026 issue of the New York Times Business section, and we read from the New York Times Business section every Thursday at 11 a.m. And your reader has been Karen, and thank you very much for listening. Hope you have a good day and take care of yourself. Okay, bye-bye.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 41 of Mark Twain by Ron Chernow. Stay with us for these readings and more.
The following program is intended for listeners who